everybody, and welcome to another episode of HAMMERSTONE TV. I have the distinct pleasure of being able to interview my good buddy, Rich Mauser. I accidentally called him Rick earlier today. I hope you forgive me for that.
Nope.
We're at Mouse House Studios today, and you're going to get to see some great footage of this incredible home studio. Rich has spent many years putting this thing together. I'm really looking forward to having this chat with you and getting to know more about, how you mix and your gear and who you've worked with and your studio and how it all came to be.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for coming by and doing this. And give me a chance to talk for a change instead of just staring at the speakers.
Yeah. So stick around, everybody. Coming up, our interview. Thank you.
Well, I started in the recording business, recording myself, actually. Just out of fascination with recording. I was a guitarist, and I got a guitar when I was 12, and right around that time, my dad had a tape deck. You could plug a little microphone into it, and I discovered that if I unsoldered the erase head, that I could keep recording over on the tape and record myself doing different parts, and it wouldn't erase anything. So it was kind of my first attempt at multi-track recording. So that was kind of fun, and at the same time too, I learned that I was just messing around with this cassette deck I had, and learned that I could plug a set of headphones in to the microphone input of this cassette deck, and that it turned into a microphone, which is kind of interesting. Headphones can become a microphone. So I was recording an acoustic guitar with these headphones wrapped around the guitar, and so I kind of messed into that, messed around, got into it, and then got a 4-track, 1/4 inch, moved up to a 8-track 1/2 inch deck, and then eventually a 16-track 2 inch, and then a 24-track 2 inch. So it's just been this fascination with sounds and with production, studying records. This is actually what really got me into production. There was a band called, or a project called Band Aid. They did this song to feed the world. Do They Know It's Christmas was the name of the song. I don't, some people might remember, but anyway, it was like Bono was on it, and all the big celebrities got together to do this song. And I bought the 12-inch single, and it had one song on it. And it had the main song that was on the radio, and I listened to it. But then on the back side, it had remix version by Trevor Horn, who had just done Yes 90125. I think it was, which I was a huge fan of that album. So anyway, I was listening to the main single, but then I flipped it over and listened to his version, and it was like night and day. I was like, that's the same song. I know that's the same drum part. That's the same performance. I'm hearing all the parts. But man, that sounds so much more life and so much more energy to it, that I thought, wow, the way you mix a song and produce it can really affect the listener, And so it grabbed me, so I was like, it just kind of spurred me on to get even more into it. Well, this studio here, this is kind of, I guess you would say, the Mouse House 2 in ways, because I did have another one for about 10 years called the Mouse House, and that was in a place up above the Rose Bowl, but it was a rental, and but it had these really great rock walls and pretty high ceilings, and I really liked, some of the stuff that came out of there, but I lost the lease, and then it was like, well, now what, and I knew I had to get another place, so I looked around at commercial spaces, and they were just super expensive, and I wasn't finding anything that had sound to it that I was liking or anything. So I thought, well, maybe buy a house, and so I searched for houses and wasn't finding anything, and finally asked a realtor, do you have anything with high ceilings? It could be torn up. I don't care what it looks like, as long as it's got high ceilings. And they brought me to this place on a rainy night in like March, and there was just leaks coming all over the place. The place was totally just like, looked like it had been abandoned for 5 years. Really bad. But I clapped my hands, and with these 35-foot vaulted ceilings this thing's got, I just clapped my hands a few times and said, oh my God, this is like when the levee breaks, if you want, those kind of drums. And so made a bid on the house and ended up getting it, and went to town turning it into the studio it is now. The build for the studio, I mean, it took like a year and a half, 2 years, and that wasn't really so much because it took that long, but it was because I was doing albums while trying to build this. So you can imagine, you know, you're trying to do an album at other studios, or, you know, the house I had at the time, I was recording at the house, and finally I moved up to here and started recording up at this place, even though it was unfinished. I mean, I did an album with a band called Spock's Beard up here, where it was the air conditioning soffits were just laying on the ground. I mean, the tubes, you know, we would just pick up the tube and point it towards whoever needed the air, you know, and just plywood on the walls and the floors, no flooring, no paint, no nothing. It was just set up the drums and run cables out the thing, and don't worry about the drywall laying against the, you know, it was just a mess. But we got good drum sounds, and it worked out. But it was, I thank the people that worked with me then, because they worked with me even when this place was a shattered mess. Well, I was living in Colorado recording, and I decided time to go to LA and try to make it in the big time. And so I came out here to kind of test the water, so to speak, and there was a girl that I knew, and she was kind of connected with some people in the music business out here, and she took me to a studio called Baby-O down on Sunset, and introduced me to a producer named Dana Strum, who was at the time doing a Vinnie Vincent album. I think he was a guitarist for Kiss, maybe around that time or something like that. But I remember talking to him about, I want to move out here, and, you know, I'm an engineer, and I want to move out to LA and get into it. He says, son, kid, don't come out here, man. They're going to eat you up alive, and there's a million people doing what you're doing. Best you just stay in Colorado and don't waste your time coming out here. But I didn't listen to him, and I came out anyway. And like all of us, right? Follow your dreams. I'll stay beside you right till the day I die. That would be, I guess, Chris Cornell. He's, I mean, anybody in the rock world knows Chris Cornell, and just an amazing singer and individual. And so it's a pleasure to work with him. I'm going to say Weezer could be a big one. Tears for Fears, Robert from Metallica, Robert Trujillo from Metallica, Joe Holmes from Ozzy, Corrosion and Conformity. I mean, I know you said one big band. If I had to limit, I mean, Chris Cornell's definitely the biggest artist, biggest band. It would have to be either Weezer, Tears for Fears, I guess, as far as what most people know, as far as names.
Yeah.
Dream Theater, yeah, Dream Theater. In the prog world, you got like Spock's Beard, Transatlantic, Neil Morse, because I definitely do a lot of progressive rock music, and right now I'm working on a Liquid Tension Experiment album, which is Jordan Rudess, John Petrucci, Mike Portnoy, and Tony Levin. So that's fun. Really incredible players. I would say Oleander is probably the biggest band that I've written with. Kind of had a long history with them from the very beginning of their career, and you know, we'd be in the studio doing pre-production, and I'm a guitarist, so I'd just pick up a guitar and start doing something, or humming melodies, or come up with ideas, and they were receptive to it, which is nice. And And so we kind of molded ideas together. And it gave me, I would say I would write more if I was just in opportunities for it to happen. When you're just mixing, or sometimes when you're producing, you're just, the bands that got their stuff written. But there are definitely bands that you are able to interject input into. I would say Only Andrew's probably the main one. Oh, of all time, well, of course, it's, recording Zeppelin. Or getting to work with Jimi Hendrix and come up with some of those crazy sounds. But there's a lot of great people out there now, too. A band called Haken, I'd like to work with. It's a prog rock band. Very, very talented. Kind of been lost in this world where things come to me, and I don't go out there after things. But I'd say just if there's this music that's got, heart and soul and room for, for the mix to help create the expansiveness of that music. I just love that. Well put together music is always fun to work with. Shoot Steely Dan, even something like that. With arrangements that are just so good, they just mix themselves. But even I wouldn't even mind getting into some pop stuff. It'd be kind of fun to do some kind of dance music or something. Maybe my 1176 compressors over there. Vintage 1176 compressors that just get used a lot. I guess you could actually say, if you lost everything, what would you go back and buy again? What would you seek out again? Definitely seek that out. And it's good old, some Neumann mics. The mixing board, of course, has a big part of your sound, but you can get a sound out of a lot of different mixing boards, I think, if they're up to a certain standard. It was built in 1987. As I bought it, I got the paperwork on it and it showed me. And it's an English console. It's all like Class A electronics, really just detailed hand built. It's some serious work going into this board. There was only 13 of these boards made. ABBA was the first one to get one, I found out. They had a studio called Polar Studios in Stockholm where they had one of these. That's where actually Zeppelin recorded Into the Outdoor. It was at that studio. And they really called this a music console. Not a broadcast console, but a music console. There was, 12 others, and I ended up with this one from a studio in Burbank, is where I bought it. It needed some work, but I found it. My friend Peter Reardon, who actually went on to get this company called Shadow Hills, he's the founder and president of Shadow Hills, and he knows a lot about gear. That guy is so smart on gear. And he called me up and said, "Hey, I saw this board in the recycler, the Craigslist of our day, recycler back then, and they were just selling it." And I went in there. They were turning the place into a Cops TV show production suite, and so they didn't need this big board. They wanted just a little Pro Tools rig, and so I took this off their hands and got it back in shape, and it just barely fit in this room. It was like I built the room and didn't know this was going to be in here. Oops, this guy just won't stop. And it just fit by about 4 inches. Okay, some rakia. These are Neve 32264 stereo compressors. These are always used on the drums as a parallel compression. So I have them permanently patched into the console, so they're used all the time. These Neve mic pre's are also used for vocals, drums, kick drums almost always, and any other things that require only 2 channels, because I got 2 of them, so stereo keyboards. These things are amazing. The 2-bus compressor here, this Smart what is it called? CL1? I think something like that, or C1. That's always on the 2-bus. For most hard-hitting stuff, it's either that or this Manley stereo compressor. I go between the two, depending on the type project and what kind of sound I'm looking for the stereo bus compression. The DVX 160, these compressors are the staple of the 70s disco drum era, is what I've been told by the people that were doing it back then. Oh, we use that on kick and snare all the time. Well, I do too. I use it on kick and snare. This BBE Sonic Maximizer down here is something that I always use on tom-toms. And I got this, what's his name? He was the engineer, Jerry Finn, that's his name, Jerry Finn, who mixed the Green Day records. He was mixing a song that I produced, and when I was there at the mix with him, I was like, hey, what are you doing to those tom-toms? And he said, oh, I always put my toms to a BBE Sonic Maximizer. So I was like, oh, I'm going to try that. I was like, wow, it's really cool. It kind of gives you that scoop in the toms that you sometimes have to do with EQ, but it's its own thing. But anyway, so I've grown accustomed to that. Not all 100% of the time, but about 95% of the time it's going through there. I always have this side chained on vocals too, this Type C Alpha Oral Exciter. Again, it's like a parallel on vocals, so it's not, the vocals aren't going through it, but they're hitting it, and it's like it bring it season to taste with it on another pair of faders. And then of course for effects I use this Lexicon a lot. This is a really interesting one here, this Cooper Time Cube. That's an effect from the 70s. It's upstairs here in the attic. It's this box that connects to this thing, and it's got, I think it's got like 30 feet of vacuum hose wrapped around, coiled up inside this box. It's got two different ones of different lengths, so you can get two delay times out of this thing. You get like I think one is 16 millisecond and another one is like 14 millisecond. But it's an actual speaker at one end, goes through this vacuum hose, and a microphone picks it up at the other end. So it has a very unique sound. It sounds amazing on guitars for like splitting a guitar sound and widening it. And there's definitely, I think if you listen to a lot of Leonard Skinner records, you'll hear it on his vocals. Cooper Time Cube on his vocals. I think Doors Love Her Madly. When I hear that song, I go, oh, that sounds like a Cooper Time Cube on his vocals. But it only does one thing, but it does it well. Get over into this thing, I'll show you this thing. This is kind of interesting. I don't know if you can see this, but this is this works a plate reverb that I have upstairs, an EMT 140 plate reverb. And this thing here, you can use it to make the reverb go longer or shorter. Anybody out there who has these UA plugins, they have a plugin version of this exact thing. But this is the way they used to be. And of course those 1176 compressors over there, those get used all the time on vocals. It's because I kind of work a hybrid of analog with digital, because I mix in Pro Tools, but I have these analog compressors all into insert points in Pro Tools, so I can put tracks through analog consoles, but also having them work through the digital domain. I can't touch these. I very rarely, I should say, ever touch the knobs on any of the stuff you see here, because I'm using it in mixes and I have to recall the mixes. And if I'm working on a few different projects at one time, you send a mix out and you wait for feedback, and then you work on something else. So the recall time would just be too intense if you go in and changing your settings for each thing. So I use plugins within Pro Tools to feed these compressors with the right gain for the sound I want on the compression. So it's definitely an analog digital hybrid mixing environment going on here.
So that was our interview. Once again, Rich Mouser, Mouse House Studios. This guy has tracked or mixed or produced so many people over the decades, and it was a real pleasure to come here and talk to you. And man, any last words that you have for the HAMMERSTONE TV fans out there?
Oh man, just keep making the great music, keep the creativity flowing. New stuff, new ideas, keep learning. That's
right on.
And best to everybody. And
yes.
thank you for watching this and checking it all out.
Definitely. All right, everybody in HAMMERSTONE land, thank you guys so much.
See you later.
Peace.
visions burn my brain. Constant anger racing through my veins. The answer now for you is feel the pain. When I rise, you will fall. As I answer your beck and call. But it's too late now. The blood is on the road. Plastic boots strapped on your feet. Confrontation out in the streets. Your confidence I surely will defy. And I don't